you're going to complain about PS5 compatibility with PS3 games, then you should compare Switch 2's compatibility with Wii U or 3DS games. What is this guy's problem? Okay. Much. With the Switch 2, Nintendo is clearly the only company that understands the importance of backward compatibility. With the Nintendo Switch 2 finally announced and fully revealed, we have learned a ton about the console and its games. While the new Nintendo games coming our way like Mario Kart World and Metroid Prime 4 Beyond are exciting, what Nintendo has said about its old games is far more interesting. Nintendo has made concerted efforts to have well done backwards compatibility with the original Switch. A big part of that is how Nintendo is handling emulation, including the amount of effort and resources it's choosing to put into that emulation. It makes other console makers like PlayStation, which won't put in the effort to emulate PS3 games, look bad for not doing more. That is so valid. An example of Nintendo putting in more effort to emulate older games than it might appear comes from the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection that come out for the original Nintendo Switch. While this collection did have an arguably scummy business model, only being sold for a limited time both physically and digitally, some of the work involved in that collection was more complicated than just emulating the original games and calling it a day. To be clear, people aren't happy that Nintendo did it this way, but the technical aspects of this particular collection are impressive, especially when it comes to Super Mario Galaxy. While Super Mario Sunshine used an internal GameCube emulator, oh my gosh, the GameCube, dubbed Hagi to run the game in its entirety, that wasn't quite the case with Mario Galaxy. For context, Super Mario Galaxy is already fully playable on the NVIDIA Tegra X1 chip that powers the Nintendo Switch, as an official port in partnership with Nintendo came to the NVIDIA Shield as a Chinese exclusive in 2018. The game was fully localized with support for full HD and some motion controls were remapped. I never knew that NVIDIA worked with Nintendo. In the 3D All-Stars collection, Nintendo did things differently from the NVIDIA Shield to get Mario Galaxy running to the Switch, using a mixture of emulation and native code from Mario Galaxy. Given the technical similarities between the Wii and the GameCube, Hagi still had its uses for GPU and audio emulation, but Nintendo actually recompiled the game CPU instructions for the Switch to use its native ARM instruction set. While some found it upsetting that instead of doing the work to port those games, that it appeared Nintendo phoned it in and just used emulators. That's only half the story. The technical work put into ensuring that Mario Galaxy ran at such a high quality, thanks to a combination of native code and emulation, is impressive to say the least, and shows that Nintendo actually cared about the quality of the collection once it reached the hands of gamers. Plus, even building a specialized emulator for an ARM platform to run GameCubes and Wii games on the underpowered Tegra X1 in itself an impressive feat. With all of that effort for a limited run release of a game collection, compare this to PlayStation. Nintendo built a Wii and a GameCube emulator targeting the ARM platform, which to be fair likely already existed internally anyway, and recompiled CPU instructions for a Wii game just so it could run well on the Switch. Meanwhile, Sony uses cloud streaming for PS3 games instead of working on PS3 emulation on the PS5, when we already know that the PS5 hardware is capable of a lot of PS3 emulation. If you have to buy all brand new games and it's not backwards compatible, guess who makes the most money? So clear and transparent Switch 2 backward compatibility. Something impressive about the Switch 2's compatibility is the transparency. What the heck happened to my reading just now? Something impressive about the Switch 2's backwards compatibility is the transparency that Nintendo has given about it. Nintendo isn't known for transparency. Sometimes it won't even confirm who develops certain games, but it did release a big list of games it had tested and listed out what works and what doesn't. The list included information as of April 15 with plans for another update ahead of launch. It includes 122 first-party titles and over 15,000 third-party games. Some are confirmed to work without issues, many boot up without problems, and a handful either don't boot up or work at all. The list includes important information about specific situations too. For example, some games work on Switch 2 but can't be played with Switch 2 Joy-Cons, like Ring Fit Adventure, but it can be played with the original Switch Joy-Con. It's important information to have, and having it confirmed by Nintendo ahead of the console launch is a big deal. Nintendo has also shared a list of games that will run better on the Switch 2. A great example is the infamous Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which do not run well with the original Switch, but on the Switch 2, though, there will be improved resolution and frame rate for that particular game with promised improvements and fixes coming in other games too. Nintendo has publicly acknowledged that the Switch 2 is emulating its predecessor, publishing an interview with some of the developers that acknowledged the challenge of supporting the original Switch. Like, that was the cherry on top with me that said I may not be buying the Nintendo Switch 2 when I found out the battery life, because they conveniently leave that out of the whole hour presentation that we watched. This is getting a bit technical, but the process of converting game data for Switch to run on Switch 2 is performed on a real-time basis as the data is read in. Do you guys say data or data? For me, it depends the day. In the same interview, it was also acknowledged that if they felt it wouldn't be a true successor to the original Switch if it didn't maintain that compatibility, so ensuring that those older games were playable was an important part of the development process. They were initially skeptical that it would be possible, but they tried anyway, and the results speak for themselves. Nintendo could not have done backwards compatibility. That might have been a marketing disaster, but let's not pretend it was a guarantee. I feel like the fact that they kept the name the same, Switch 2, obviously hints at backwards compatibility. A lot of what these companies do is they change the name completely if it's not going to be backwards compatible. I think it's completely reasonable for people to expect console to be backward compatible moving forward, especially when a console is released as a direct successor. Yes, that's exactly what I was saying. However, it was not that long ago that the PS4 couldn't play PS3 games and the Nintendo Switch couldn't play Wii and Wii U games. To further that, the best-selling game on Nintendo Switch, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, yup, that was the first one I owned too. I think I bought the bundle, was a port of a Wii U game. In fact, Nintendo sold a ton of Wii U ports, partially because the Wii U sold poorly, but that appeared to be a large part of its strategy. To be clear, it's entirely possible that Nintendo considered not having backwards compatibility since it would have been able to sell those games again, though it's equally likely that the departure from the PowerPC architecture to ARM proved much of a hurdle to overcome. While this was a major issue going from the PS3 to the PS4, given the successive nature of the console and past consoles sporting backwards compatibility, the Nintendo Switch is an entirely different beast to the Wii U. Now Nintendo is charging for some Switch 2 edition upgrades, but is selling a $20 upgrade. Wait, I thought it was closer to $30. Isn't the same as selling another $60 game. Nintendo's also adding another system to the Switch online with the GameCube. It should sell those games on the eShop instead of just locking them behind a subscription, but having the system available at all is still great. Plus, it, as already mentioned, many gamers are getting free updates to an avail of the improved Switch 2 hardware. Cool. I'm pretty excited for this too. One of the big selling factors is the backwards compatibility and also the ability to upgrade some of those beloved games. Someone's saying that this article has factual errors. Wow, party pooper Chad. Chad, why don't you just write the article then? Sony not emulating PS3 games, Mario Kart 8 being a new game, and is also just wrong from the offset. Nintendo does okay on backtrack compatibility, but by no means the leader here. Maybe they used to be with the Virtual Console, but they got rid of that. I'd say there may be a leg behind Sony, but that's a big maybe. This article smells like the amount of AI. What? It doesn't, this article did not give AI for me. So please don't do that. Don't add to the mountains of AI slop already diluting the internet. What is this guy's problem? Okay, you know what? Every single person, every single chat has a Chad. This is not a good Chad. This is like a Karen, but it's a Chad. And if it was written by a human, I don't know. Do like an hour of research before writing. I find it hard to believe any research was done before writing this. It's so blatantly wrong. You're going to complain about PS5 compatibility with PS3 games, then you should compare Switch 2's compatibility with Wii U or 3DS games. It's a complete different product though. What the heck? That guy is stretching. He's doing the max stretch. The Series X can play every one game, most 360 games, and a lot of Xbox games. The Switch 2 can play Switch games because they're the same thing. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, they would have rebranded the name. They wouldn't have kept Switch in the name if they weren't planning on keeping it backwards compatible. Chad left another comment. the life of the party. He says, to be fair, Switch 2 isn't actually the same as Switch 1. Nintendo has said that the internal architecture is very different and they had to build a translation layer in order to run Switch 2 games on it. This article is still quite bad though, don't get me wrong. Like, he is on a hill. Oh my gosh.